Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, today we're looking at something that honestly feels like an absolute superpower for anyone who needs to automate API testing but really wants to skip the headache of writing complex scripts. If you've ever felt totally bogged down by manual testing, you are going to love this. We're exploring Postman Flows, a visual tool that completely redefines how non-developers, and honestly, seasoned engineers too, can visually orchestrate APIs. All right, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap. We'll start with the no-code API game changer, then move into building your first flow. After that, we're adding logic and conditions, walking through an automated morning health check scenario, and finally exporting and sharing flows. Section 1, the no-code API game changer. Let's talk about escaping manual testing. Look, if you manage APIs or do quality assurance, you already know the absolute pain of manual testing. Normally, you're stuck writing pages of fragile, complex test scripts just to pass a single variable from one request to another. It's highly repetitive and it's painfully slow. Postman Flows replaces all of that with an automated visual system where you need absolutely zero code. You literally just draw the connections between your endpoints. It's a real game changer. So what is it exactly? At its core, Postman Flows is a visual, no-code workflow builder. It takes static API endpoints and turns them into these modular, drag-and-drop blocks on an infinite canvas. Instead of writing code, you're building workflows where you can see exactly how requests connect, how data transforms, and how the entire system interacts in real time. So the crucial point is that it completely bridges the gap between reading a technical specification and actually executing operations. Section 2. Building your first flow. Let's start connecting the blocks. For our demo, we're going to use the safe public Postman Echo API. You can find it at echo.getpostman.com. It's perfect for safe, reproducible demos without the risk of messing up any production data. Building a flow is honestly a lot like snapping together building blocks. You just drag an HTTP request block onto your canvas. When it runs, you extract a variable using a create variable block, and then simply pass that variable right into the input port of your next request block. In a traditional setup, you'd have to write custom environment parsing scripts just to pull this off. But here, with a GET request fetching data, you physically connect its output to the input of a variable block. You've securely pinned that data, and you didn't have to type a single line of code. And this brilliantly illustrates the magic of visual orchestration. When the flow actually executes, you see this bright line visually traveling from your variable block straight into the next post request. You can literally watch your payload move. It completely removes the guesswork from your testing because you know exactly what's being handed off to the next step. Section 3. Adding logic and conditions. Making your workflow smart. Now, you might be wondering about a very realistic scenario. What if the API just straight up fails during the test? If a server goes down or a payload is malformed, a basic automation just crashes, right? And then you're left digging through console logs instead of enjoying your morning coffee. We really need the workflow to make decisions on the fly. Well, Flows gives us these super powerful logic gates to handle this gracefully. We can set up a condition block that evaluates the HTTP status. Think of it like a smart intersection. If it gets a 200 OK, the data routes through the then port and the test continues perfectly. But if it detects a 4x error, like a bad request, it automatically routes out the else port. You could easily connect that port to a Slack alert or a logging block. It branches the workflow intelligently without skipping a beat. Section 4. Automated morning health checks. Let's look at a real support scenario. Instead of manually testing services every single morning, we can build a sequential, full-stack health check to drastically reduce our mean time to resolution. Let's see how this builds. Step 1 pings the auth API for a fresh token. It then passes that token directly to Step 2 to fetch user data, which ensures our core services are actually responsive. Finally, Step 3 validates the database status. It hits all three endpoints sequentially, applying our conditional logic at every single step to catch any errors instantly. And to wrap up that health check, we connect the final output right into a display block. The display block sits directly on the canvas and gives you a real-time visual summary of the execution. If everything passed, you get this highly satisfying, clean dashboard showing all green, successful statuses. Think about that. You've just automated your entire morning routine, aggregating really complex API responses into a visual format that anyone on the support team can verify at a single glance. Section 5. Exporting and sharing flows. Scaling your automation. Now, what's really interesting about this capability is how a workflow transforms into a true team asset. Postman offers incredible flexibility here. You can export data as a standard JSON file, or, and this is wild, use Flow's actions to deploy your workflow to the Postman cloud instantly with just one click. It literally becomes a serverless application. You can even embed these workflows as standalone web pages or present the logic using built-in slides for your non-technical stakeholders. I want to highlight a quote directly from our source material because it perfectly summarizes this massive shift we're seeing. Flows transform static API documentation into dynamic, executable diagrams that show exactly how your APIs work together to deliver value. You see, you're no longer just reading about what an API should do, you're actively watching it happen in an executable environment. Which leaves us with one final big question for you. What repetitive API task will you automate first using an infinite visual canvas? Whether it's setting up a daily health check, handling complex pagination, or passing secure tokens, the tools are now right at your fingertips, and again, no coding required. I highly recommend opening up the Postman desktop app, connecting to the public Echo API, and dragging your very first blocks onto the canvas to see it for yourself. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and happy building!